So Dave Myers, you're a 33-year veteran of the Sheriff's Department. Why did you decide to run for the sheriff?
After 33 years, it was a decision that came to me kind of slowly. Right now I'm at the commander level. I think what struck me the most was the resistance from my peers for the change.
The San Diego County Board of Supervisors recently voted to support the Trump administration lawsuit against some various sanctuary state laws in California. And the sheriff initially said they should stay out of it. He later sort of walked that back and said that he didn't want to tell them how to do their jobs. What do you see as the sheriff's role in providing advice to the policymakers?
Exactly that. The sheriff has an obligation, especially when it came to SB 54, which was all about law enforcement, which was all about the collaborative efforts between a federal law enforcement agency and a local law enforcement agency that have concurrent jurisdiction along an international border. It is the sheriff's role to advise policymakers on what actually is occurring. And what's actually occurring is what I've seen and started back in 2008, where I created a program called Operation Stone Garden and Border Crime Suppression Team, which is now the national model for how local law enforcement agencies work along an international border with federal law enforcement agencies. And it doesn't include immigration enforcement. It has nothing to do with immigration enforcement. It has everything to do with enforcing state laws against those who would exploit a region along a border.
You've said you would not support Assemblywoman Shirley Weber's bill, which would largely restrict the officer's ability to use lethal force. Why?
It doesn't make sense to me. It essentially chronicles a step-by-step process to get to deadly force. I've been involved in 2 shootings in my career on duty. A person had a gun held to my head and pulled the trigger. Luckily, that bullet didn't go off, but the other 2 did. We had an exchange of gunfire. Based on her bill, based on the language in her bill, I would have to have some sort of verbal communication before shooting. I would have to explore other force options, mace, taser, and then in my mind have the ability to think then I go directly to deadly force. The second instance, a security guard shot at me from about 50 or 60 yards away. Bullets went up one side and down the other. There was no time to say, no, stop shooting, let me think, are there other options? I had to respond with like force to stop the threat. I think we should concentrate on what I've said for a long time, which is, let's start with cultural competency training. Let's start with exploring and understanding who we are within an agency. Within the Sheriff's Department, we don't even talk about implicit bias. We don't even discuss even if it's there. Look at all the data we have. San Diego State did a study on the data for San Diego Police. I think we should do the same. Make it very public, very transparent. Then have a discussion of where it goes. De-escalation. It has to start in the academy. And it has to be ongoing training so we're not chasing people through backyards when we know where they are. And then we, in turn, create the conflict. And then what happens is when law enforcement encounters a black man, they see a gun in his hand. But when law enforcement encounters a white man, they don't. There is something inherently wrong in that narrative. And the bill that Dr. Weber, and she's so progressive in so many other ways, that this is not the way forward for law enforcement.
Why should voters pick you over the current sheriff, Bill Gore?
There has to be a cultural shift in law enforcement, and it has to start now. It has to start with building that trust back up. We're seeing increasing cases within our jail system where loved ones are dying for no reason, whether they're suicides or a recent case to just publicize where the only way to control an individual in a very controlled situation was to gang fu the person. And essentially it smothered the person to death. That's not who we are. Hate crimes, we're seeing a triple-digit increase in hate crimes around San Diego County, but we're not talking about it. We're not talking about a culture within law enforcement that I got in many, many years ago that I absolutely love because I see the benefit of what it brings to a community to make them feel safe and secure. But somehow we got away from that. We got away from that. We're seen as the invaders now. we're not seen as community partners. And if we don't stop that process now, if we don't continue to be open and transparent, not hide behind certain laws that says we can't tell you what we're doing, we can't show you what we're doing, then it's going to take generations to change that back.
Dave Myers, thanks so much for talking with us.
Thanks for having me.